Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 105. And guys, it is Wicked Week. It is Wicked Week. It's also Thanksgiving week when you are hearing the podcast. This podcast in full will probably be coming out pre-Thanksgiving. So as you are listening to this podcast and as you are listening to the segments, almost all of them will be coming out before or on Thanksgiving. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you guys have a lot to be thankful for this year, or can find a lot to be thankful for if it was a trying year. But thank you guys so much. Speaking of being thankful, thank you guys so much for joining. As always, I say it every week, but just never take this for granted. It's awesome to be able to do this. So thank you so much, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the week. Hope you're enjoying also looking forward to Stranger Things Season 5 coming up very soon. So we'll talk about that hopefully in next week's episode. But anyways, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like. And if you're interested in the audio-only platform, that is where the podcast is posted in full first. So it's on Saturday mornings in the United States time, and so you can check it out there. Spotify, Apple Podcast, Overcast links are always in the description down below. And then the full podcast on YouTube will be posted a couple days later. Guys, whole lot to talk about. There was just a ton of news that came out this past week, in addition to Wicked, Wicked could have been just the topic of this entire podcast, but whole lot to get to. Excuse me. So, without any further ado, let's dive into today's topics. Alrighty, guys. Anyone here remember Black Adam? No, me neither. Just kidding. I mean, of course we remember Black Adam, but honestly, that was such a strange time in the DCEU's history. Can we all agree on that at the very least? Even for those of you who really enjoy Black Adam. And look, I mean, I don't hate Black Adam. It's entertaining. At some point when we continue our DCE rewatch, I think we will probably later on in December. We're going to put a couple episodes out from the DCE rewatch. I enjoy Black Adam. You know, we'll see it eventually, my thoughts on it in full. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. But is it groundbreaking or anything like that? I don't think so. And again, I think it'll be most remembered for being in this really weird time where the DCU was going to be born, and we knew about the DCU. We knew about the reboot that was coming. But these movies, The Flash and Black Adam and all these things were still having to be released, and it was just strange. And also, at the time, Dwayne Johnson kind of tried to stage a mini coup within Warner Brothers, and he tried to take over and be one of the creatives behind it, and he brought back Henry Cavill, but that turned out to be a huge bummer for Henry Cavill because he announced he was coming back, and then he was not coming back, and it was just a disaster. And again, Henry Cavill is not my favorite Superman, but I just feel so bad for the guy just after what he had to go through. Anyways, we're not really here to litigate on Black Adam, because one of the characters in Black Adam, one of the actors in Black Adam that I thought was really quite good was the legendary former James Bond, Pierce Brosnan, for those of you guys who remember, played Dr. Fate, one of the characters, one of the members of the Justice Society. So now we've had Justice League in live action, we've had Justice Society, and now we have Justice Gang in the DCU. But Dr. Fate was a part of that Justice Society, which had Hawkman, Cyclone, and Atom Smasher as well. So Pierce Brosnan, you know, he's doing an interview. He's doing an interview with GQ. And all of a sudden, he just drops this nugget. They ask him about Dr. Fate, and he says this, quote, "I've heard that Dr. Fate was going to have his own show or his own movie. I've heard that he's going to be in the next Superman." Okay, so first of all, let's just looking at the first bit of that quote here. I heard that he was going to get his own movie or his own show. Sure. Yeah, I don't doubt it. At the time, I'm sure that with DC in such turmoil that people were being offered things left and right, and Black Adam was being, you know, promoted as this big next step in the DCU, and I'm sure there was going to be a Black Adam versus Superman kind of movie. I'm sure people were being promised things all the time. And yeah, I liked Dr. Fate quite a bit. I'm sure that the Warner Brothers executives kind of saw that and said, okay, Pierce Brosnan, let's greenlight the Pierce Brosnan movie or show with Dr. Fate. Great. Awesome. So I don't doubt that. That's totally fine. But then, right, it's not the first part of that quote that we're looking at here. It's this next part. I've heard, he says, that he's going to be in the next Superman. Hold the phone. What is going on here? So, I mean, a few things, right? Number one, James Gunn has not been shy about bringing back characters from the DCEU that he's particularly liked and bringing them into the DCU. Now, normally, in almost every circumstance, they are characters that he himself brought to the big screen, right? So characters like John Cena's Peacemaker and all the Peacemaker, the 11th Street Kids with Economos and Harcourt and all of them, those are his characters, right? He's brought them back. Amanda Waller, not necessarily his character, but in his movie, The Suicide Squad. So he's bringing her back, right? So these are characters that, yeah, I mean, we're in the DCEU. It kind of got confusing because, you know, what's canon, what's not canon, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, sure, bringing them into the DCEU. He's been sort of fast and loose with that. Another, though, interesting exception to this rule of what had to die in the DCEU and what was coming over is Joel Maradueña's Blue Beetle, who we haven't seen yet in the DCEU, but has been confirmed to be coming back and playing a very similar version of Blue Beetle from all intents and purposes. Because it seems like most of the events of that Blue Beetle film are going to be canon, though it's not going to be referenced or shown, I don't think, from all the comments from Jolo and from James Gunn. So that's interesting. Because Jolo was not an actor or a character, Blue Beetle, that James Gunn himself had a direct hand in, but he seemed to like the portrayal enough that he is bringing back Jolo to be in the DCU. And now, it seems like he is plucking, if this is true, by the way, if Pierce, because I'm not saying that Pierce Brosnan is just confused or whatnot. He might have heard something. He might have heard something wrong. He might have heard a rumor that he took to the bank. I don't know. I don't know where this is coming from. Maybe, though, James Gunn has said, okay, so Man of Tomorrow, because that is the next Superman movie, right? It's one thing if he said, oh, the next Superman movie, and then he was referencing the first Superman movie somehow. But because again, Man of Tomorrow isn't technically a Superman movie, but you know, so there's all sorts of weird, interesting things you could do with language and semantics here. But let's just say, right, for simplicity's sake, Occam's razor, the simplest answer is usually the correct one, that he's referencing Man of Tomorrow, Superman, Man of Tomorrow. Is it possible that James Gunn liked Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate enough to bring him back into the DCU and put him in Man of Tomorrow? It's possible. He's doing it with Jolo. And again, Jolo, you know, was not in a movie that he himself was directly involved in. He just liked Blue Beetle. Could he have liked Dr. Fate enough? Yeah, it's possible. And Man of Tomorrow, because it's not like, oh, you know, this movie is the really gritty, grimy the Penguin season 2, and Dr. Fate isn't it? It's like, that doesn't really make sense. Although, again, I think anything's possible. This is Man of Tomorrow, where we're heading into this salvation dimension, where presumably a lot of metahumans are going to be trapped. It would be very easy for Dr. Fate to show up in Salvation, right? The prison that was at the end of Peacemaker season 2. So there is a very, very clear and easy way for this to happen. And the question is that what Pierce Brosnan is referring to? Because he says straight up, I've heard that Dr. Fate is going to be in the next Superman. Also, he says, by the way, that he says Dr. Fate is going to be in the next Superman. So maybe he's just heard the character's going to be in there and not him. I don't know. Again, a lot of really interesting and weird semantics going on here. Is this possible? Yeah, it's possible. Would this have been remotely in any of my top 500 guesses as to what was going to happen to Man of Tomorrow? No, absolutely not. I didn't think any character from Black Adam was going to come back. But here we are. And to be honest with you, as I sit back and survey the options here, this seems like the simplest and easiest explanation of what is going to happen. It's so strange and weird of why James Gunn would cherry pick Dr. Fate, but maybe he has a very specific role with Brainiac in mind that he needs Dr. Fate to be in this movie. I have no idea. I simply do not know. So we're going to have to file this away. This is one of those stories where we file this away and we'll just have to see what happens from here. Guys, do you think Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate is going to return in Superman? Not Superman, but, you know, Superman. Man of Tomorrow? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's continue on. We are now at the halfway point of the new HBO MAX series, It, Welcome to Derry. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for It, Welcome to Derry. So if you have not seen the episode, no worries. Make sure to save this segment, save this podcast, or save this episode, whatever you are listening to, for later and come back once you have. Let's dive in to It, Welcome to Derry. So this show has been interesting because I feel like, and not to reiterate every single episode or every single podcast episode, but just to say that I'm generally not a horror fan, but I am a fan of this It franchise. I think that it has enough story, enough intrigue, and enough, outside, not jump scare and not terrifying things. Although this episode had some of the more, gruesome things that I just had to look away from. I feel like the previous 3 episodes have been scary in parts, but not horrific. This episode had some horrific things in there. If you are not a fan of eyeball horror, which I am certainly not, look away at certain parts of this episode because, oh my goodness. But anyways, I feel like there's enough outside of those that make this franchise enticing and interesting. There's mythology there around Pennywise and what he is and who he is. And I think that all that stuff is really interesting, right? I really do. But I think last episode, I started to feel this sense of, not dread, no pun intended for Pennywise, right? It wasn't dread, but it was more of it feels like this show had been humming along at a pretty decent clip, especially after the twist in the first episode. That was great, I thought at the end, of how they were able to subvert expectations. Because you thought that, that's the group of kids, right? No, that is not the group of kids. Because 2 or 3 of them died, right? But then, episode 2, I think, okay, you're setting up more stuff. And then episode 3, I was like, well, now it feels like all roads lead to Pennywise, and we kind of need to see Pennywise, right, at this point. So I was thinking, okay, well, episode 3 in itself was not bad. I thought it was interesting and entertaining. I think we're now, we understand where we're going, right? And again, maybe if you were an outside observer who has never seen it before, maybe there's some intrigue there about Pennywise, but I feel like if you're watching a show called It, Welcome to Derry, and I've also made this point before, they're not trying to hide him. He's been in the trailers, and he's literally on the banner as you open up HBO Max for It, Welcome to Derry. So they're not hiding him, right? So if all roads lead to Pennywise, I think we got to see him, right? I think he's got to make his presence known in the show, because otherwise this show is sort of a watered down version. I mean, it has more things going on than just that, but it's sort of for lack of a better term, a watered down version of the It movies, where they're just kind of, being hunted and scared by Pennywise, and then some people kind of get wise to it and try to defeat him. And it's like, okay, great. That's the movie. That's the show. Which is a little disappointing, because I feel like if you're going to do a prequel, one of the things I didn't want to happen was them to just rehash the movies, right? But at any rate, I thought, okay, last episode, let's kind of see where they're going, but also it's starting to wear a little thin. And I'm not going to lie, this episode it's showing that this show is starting to test my patience just a little bit. I think there are still very interesting things happening in It, Welcome to Derry. I really do. But this show is starting to feel like it's spinning its wheels until they get to Pennywise. It feels like you could have tightened up a lot of this that's going on now with episodes 3 and 4. And you could have jumped to whatever the big pivot point is that the show is wanting to get to. Because I feel like there is a pivot point coming. I just don't know if it's going to be in episode 5, 6, 7, 8. That would be bad if it was an 8, right? If Pennywise doesn't show up until episode 8, I don't even know. That's a mistake. So look, I mean, a lot of interesting things happened in this episode, right? I think, first of all, I forget the kid's name, but the other girl with the glasses who's pretending to be friends with Lily, that whole stuff, was gruesome. I thought it was absolutely gruesome. I did not want to watch any of that. I looked away for about half of it, and I caught half of it. I don't want to remember what I saw. It was gruesome. Crazy stuff. And I think that, what's her name? Charlotte Hanlon? Are they Hanlons? I think her whole arc is interesting, because now she's starting to take an interest in Hank Grogan, who is Ronnie's dad. There are a lot of characters in the show. And that's another thing that maybe we'll talk about just for a quick second. There are a lot of characters in the show, and the show is not necessarily focusing in on any one of them, which is fine. But having a lot of characters and dispersing all the storylines like this is starting to make this show feel a little scatterbrained, But anyways, you have Charlotte, and she's trying to investigate what's going on with Hank, and also her husband is not being able to find or disclose what's going on in the military base and things like that. So, and then also there's that other guy, Hanrahan, I forget what his last name is, but he's possessed or something, because he's able to read that guy's mind. By the way, I was going to talk about this later, but this is coming up now. I was watching the episode and I was like, it is what it is. Things are happening and whatnot, but you're still, it's all still just like, hey, Pennywise is around, but you don't see him. There's a balloon, get inching closer to seeing Pennywise, but he's not there. What's going on? What could it be? Right. It's still kind of the same sort of stuff. And then you get to the point. So I was kind of, I was entertained by it, but I wasn't riveted. And then you get to this part where it's like, hey, nephew, tell me a story. And he literally narrates the entire story of Pennywise. Which, look, I mean, is it interesting? Sure. Meteor falls from the sky. It's a star or something, and he lands in this forest, and he gets trapped in this forest, but then this forest becomes Derry. It's interesting. Did I need that kid to be narrating that for 10 minutes? No. I was, and again, it was late at night, but I was falling asleep. I was like, I just can't. I can't with this kind of exposition. It's not interesting. It somehow was just not interesting in the way it was conveyed. It felt very lazy writing-wise, to be honest with you. There felt like there could have been so many more interesting ways to show this origin. This whole origin story just could have been played out at the beginning of an episode. It just didn't need to be narrated like this from a kid. I get the military wants to know where he is because the big thing is that, you see the house at the end, which is familiar, right? That's where Pennywise is because that's where he hangs out, in that house. So I get that they needed to find that out, but it just felt like this was one of the more lazy ways you could get to that point, which is, again, just disappointing from my point of view. But again, I mean, I feel like this show has so many interesting things going for it, but the fact that it's just sort of windmilling at this point and saying, hey, Pennywise, you remember Pennywise? Well, we're going to get to him at some point, feels disappointing to me, because I acknowledge that this show is not necessarily a one-to-one of one of the It movies. I know that, right? I think that there are a lot of actually quite interesting things about how the military is seeking after this entity and wanting to use the entity and all that kind of stuff. I think that's interesting and maybe compelling, depending on where they go with that. But I mean, this show is halfway over. I don't know what we've been doing, where we've been going. We've been getting hints here and there. We get it, right? I feel like the show was maybe misunderstood its audience a little bit. We get it. Derry is cursed. We understand Derry is cursed. We get that Pennywise lurks around and scares kids. I feel like there's been a little bit of a lack of drive and purpose with these last few episodes that make me go, this better have a payoff. Because at this point, I just am kind of sitting here waiting for Pennywise. And I don't know. I feel like the It movie, the first It movie, maybe captured lightning in a bottle. Because at this point, I'm like, right now, I just see people getting scared. And people getting scared is not necessarily why I signed up for the It Welcome to Derry show. Maybe it's why you signed up for the It Welcome to Derry show. But it's not, my personal preference. So, yeah, I mean, that's sort of where we're at. I don't know. Maybe we'll finally get to see the clown in episode 5. But at this point, I tune in every week and I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'm just sort of seeing similar things and not a whole lot is happening in terms of advancing the storylines. I also, again, I think there are just way too many things going on that you have to jump between all these different things, that you're advancing each storyline just a little bit, but it feels like you could have tightened it up more so that, a couple storylines could really start to move. But again, maybe that's just me. Guys, what do you think of It Welcome to Derry so far? What do you think of episode 4? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, this is going to be interesting. So today, in this particular segment, we're here to talk about the teaser trailer for the new live-action remake for the Disney, I don't even know if you can call it a classic when the first film came out less than 10 years ago, but modern classic, I suppose, Moana. Because for those of you who don't know, Moana, and if you're thinking to yourself, wait, didn't that movie just come out in theaters? Didn't the second animated movie Yup. But, all that aside, Disney is making a live-action remake of Moana. Not only a live-action remake of Moana, a live-action remake of Moana that's going to be pretty much shot for shot from what I've heard, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. We'll talk about all of this in just a second. But they are making this movie. It's coming out July 2026, and we have our first teaser trailer for it. I'm going to save a lot of my thoughts on the trailer, or on just the context and why this movie is even being made. But let me just talk about the trailer as a trailer. Just all the baggage, all the context, all the stuff aside, because, usually I love context. I love trying to paint the picture of what's going on. Let's just talk about this trailer. It's good. It looks good. The song, iconic song, How Far I'll Go, being played in the background. It's good. I think all the actors look like they belong in this movie, as in they all look like they are their animated counterparts. So yeah, if you're going to remake the movie, I mean, from what little we see of Maui, it looks like Maui, and Moana looks like Moana, and singing is great, and the water looks great. That sounds cynical. I mean that genuinely. The water visuals do look really nice, and the boat looks good, and yeah, I mean, it looks like Moana, and it's a very short teaser trailer, but if you were going to convey the idea that you're going to be remaking Moana, great. That looks like Moana. That definitely looks like Moana. But of course, we cannot talk about this trailer without returning to this conversation over and over that we've had over and over and over again. What is the point of this movie? And I'm about to go, not on a rant. I don't like ranting or anything like that. Ranting and raving and things like that. No, I just want to talk. Just want to talk. But I'm about to, go off on a little spiel that I fully recognize is hypocritical. I've said this before. I fully recognize is hypocritical because another film, literally 3 or 4 months ago, did this exact same thing, and I love that movie. I loved the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon. Not only was it basically a live-action shot-for-shot remake, yes, it also starred one of the original animated stars as Gerard Butler returned to play Stoic. So, again, shot-for-shot remake. Not only that, I mean, it used the same CGI model pretty much as Toothless, of course, updated for 2025. It looks like some of the animated things in the original Moana. I forget what those shell creatures are, but they look pretty much the same as they did those pirate little, I don't even know what they are, but in the original Moana, it looks pretty much the same, right? So another film just did this. And hand up, I did a review about this movie. I loved it. And I know it's inconsistent of me because I've said it before. I mean, some of these live action remakes, you're like, what is the point of this? Now, I'm not wholly against live action remakes. I think that if you do a good enough job, if there's been enough time to introduce this to a new generation, great, go for it. I actually think that's, I know the cynical side of people and myself want to say that, oh, you only remade Aladdin because more money, which again, Aladdin made $1 billion. But for someone like me who didn't grow up watching Aladdin, I grew up watching Pixar movies. I saw Aladdin once or twice when I was a kid. It was a really cool introduction or reintroduction to the movie and the characters. I liked it a lot. I really did. I think the live action Aladdin is great. And it's great. These remakes are great for movies like Jungle Book, where I don't think a lot of us really cherish the Jungle Book in the same way that Beauty and the Beast and Lion King and Aladdin, right? And I think the live action remake was a great reminder of, how good the movie is. And I think that that's awesome. So not, denying there is value in live action remakes at all. Again, cynical side, yes, it's more money. Every movie is, well, not every movie, but a lot of movies are made just for money. Or not, well, it's a complicated scenario of, yes, movies are made for money, but they're also made for art and things like that. So there's a complicated balance that's going on there. Anyways, I can't help but watch this trailer, though, and understanding that I felt a very different way about How to Train Your Dragon, understanding that is very inconsistent with what I'm about to say, I don't get what the point of this movie is. I really don't. In my head, right, this may sound like self-justification, it may sound like, as people say, copium, right? But I think there are a couple differences with this Moana live-action remake that maybe make it a little bit different than How to Train Your Dragon. First of all, it has literally been just a few years since the first Moana came out. Not only has it been just a few years since the first Moana came out, it's been less than 1 year to this very day as I'm recording this. That I think less than 1 year. Yeah, less than 1 year to this very day that the second animated Moana has come out. And I guess I get it if you're going to remake How to Train Your Dragon. It's been about 15 years, I think. Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, if you're going to remake Tangled right now, sure, that's fine. I think. I mean, what's the threshold of being too close and too far? I don't know. But I mean, it's sort of like, it when you see it. This feels like it's way too close to the original, especially when you are still releasing animated sequels to that movie. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy in my mind. So there's that. The other thing too is that, I mean, if I'm watching this trailer, right? And I guess my question is, because this trailer looks good. I think the movie looks good. I really do. I think the movie, as presented on screen, it looks really good. So actually, my question for this movie, why was it animated? Because if you're telling me that there is pretty much no distinguishing between this animated and live action remake, obviously other than live action versus animated, but if you're telling me that this is basically the same story and the same visuals and same everything, what is separating it? Why did you make it animated in the first place? Did you literally just make it animated in the first place just so you could remake it in live action? No, right? That's obviously not true, I don't think. So, but I'm looking at this trailer and going, well, wait a second. I don't think a whole lot has changed since, in terms of visual effect. I mean, things have changed, right? But in terms of what you're seeing on screen, you could have made this exact movie at the same time the animated Moana came out. So my question really is, why didn't you just make this movie in the first place, And then the cynical side of me comes out and says, well, of course, you can just redouble and make money. You can double up on this. And I don't know. I get it, right? I understand that things are complicated. And like I said, I just watched a movie that was basically this exact same scenario and I really liked it. So hands up, right? I'm guilty of this. But I think what I saw in this trailer looked good. I don't I don't understand why this movie's being made. So, anyways, guys, those are my thoughts on it. It's complicated. I fully admit that I myself am being inconsistent on this, but it's how I feel. It's how the trailer hit me. And I guess we'll see as it comes out in July. Guys, what do you think of this first teaser trailer for the live-action Moana movie? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, didn't have a chance to talk about the first trailer for the movie that we're going to be talking about in today's segment, but let's correct that. Let's fix those mistakes. Let's atone for those sins. Let's talk about trailer number 2 for the upcoming movie in March, Project Hail Mary. Now, if you don't know Project Hail Mary, I think a couple things should stand out to you as we head closer to the film. Number 1, this is a movie directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. Phil Lord and Chris Miller, they are the two minds behind movies like the Lego Movie, 21 Jump Street, and the most recent Into the Spider-Verse movies. They also were going to do Solo, a Star Wars Story, but they have been some of the more creative minds in Hollywood over the past few years. So that's exciting. Number 2, this is based on a book, more on that later, that is written by the same author. I think his name is Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. And that book is great. That movie ended up being great. That was directed by Ridley Scott. And this is by the same author. Now, we'll talk about the trailer in just a second, but I want to preface this by saying one of the reasons I was really excited to talk about this trailer this time around, because the first trailer kind of came and went, and I thought it looked good. But then between then, I actually had somebody who I knew read the book and tell me, you should read the book. It's a really good one. And I had read The Martian, and I said, okay, I really like The Martian, so let's give it a try. So in between the first and this second trailer, I actually read Project Hail Mary, and I really liked it. I might have even liked it a little more than The Martian, to be quite honest with you. It's a fantastic book. And so, having read the book rather, and then watching that first trailer again, it got me so excited. And now we get to see the second trailer. So I'm not going to give away a whole lot about what happens in the book in the segment. I want to save that if you guys haven't read the book, please go read the book. I would recommend it before watching the movie. I think that's always a good idea, to be quite honest with you. But if for those of you who haven't read the book, I'm not going to give away anything in particular other than what we see in the trailer. And I'm not even going to explain what a lot of the things that you see in the trailer are, because for me, it makes a lot of sense. But for those of you who don't know that much, I think that it's best to go into the movie cold. And I think that this trailer, it's interesting, right? Because it's based on a book. So that's, it's not like it's a completely original IP for sure. But I think that it's a movie that is in this interesting space of it's a big budget action, not action movie, but yeah, kind of an action space movie, in a similar vein to The Martian, I suppose. But it's not necessarily tied to Star Wars or Marvel or Mattel or Disney or anything like that. It's just sort of a movie that's coming out, and it's coming out in March, which is generally actually, in recent years, been considered prime real estate as far as movies go. I think movies do pretty well in March these days. And I'm going to be very curious to see whether people come to see a movie like this. Because I think from what it looks like, it has all the makings of a really interesting, big budget movie. I think it was super important, actually, for a movie like this that's not attached to anything except for a book that I really like, and I think a lot of people really like. But again, not everyone will know. I actually think for this kind of movie, more than any other movie, or more than most other movies, it was actually really important to attach a very recognizable name to the role. So I think Ryan Gosling as Ryland Grace, it was a great bit of casting. I really do think so. But on top of that, after having read the book, I think just casting, again, you don't want to just cast based on the name alone. And so I think, having Ryan Gosling promote the movie and be at the front of all these trailers is obviously a big deal. But I also think, just based on what I've read in the book, he is great casting for this character. This character is sort of in the similar vein of how Matt Damon played Mark Watney in The Martian. He's kind of self-aware, self-deprecating, but kind and good, good-natured. It's very similar character archetypes, and I think Ryan Gosling embodies that so well. Right? He's such a relatable figure, but he can play that sort of hero, unlikely hero, protagonist sort of character extremely well. As well. So I think that it is actually quite inspired casting to get Ryan Gosling. Inspired casting. Of course, he's one of the biggest names in Hollywood. But still, I think that it's actually a really good thing. And the visuals look great. It's filmed for IMAX from what the trailer says. You see a lot of sort of his time on Earth and then his time in space. You see the creature that's called Rocky and his interactions with him and some funny language barriers that are going on there. So yeah, I think this, The Martian, I think did quite well actually for box office, if I remember correctly. And I'm actually really hoping that people come out and see this movie, even those people who don't even know that it's based on a book, just go out and see it because, Ryan Gosling, and it's a big space movie and it looks fun. Because I think that this is the kind of movie where Yeah, I mean, sure. It's not a completely original movie, but it is sort of an original look into a sci-fi property that I think would be really fun. That's not attached to Star Wars, not attached to Marvel or DC or anything like that. So I think it would be awesome. Again, having read the book, I just think it would be awesome if people turned out in huge numbers to see this movie because I think it just has all the makings of a really fun spring, early summer kind of movie. And I can't wait to see it. So, guys, what do you think of the second trailer for Project Hail Mary? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, the Hunger Games franchise was pretty quiet for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, it looks like we're getting a new book, a new movie pretty much every single year now because Suzanne Collins, the author of the original Hunger Games trilogy, has been writing a lot of prequels for the Hunger Games. And, to her credit, I've been enjoying them as I've been reading through them. And now, well, so it's interesting because she's writing these books, and then almost immediately after, they're developing them into movies. It's almost like they're a tandem deal, which I actually haven't seen in recent memory of, books being almost, I'm not saying that this is 100% true, I'm just saying it just from what it looks like, books being made almost to then just be made straight into movies. I think that's a very interesting concept. But anyways, The Hunger Games, obviously one of the most successful young adult franchises in the modern era, and we got a prequel earlier which was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes with Rachel Zegler, and I thought it was fine. It was a pretty good movie. And now we're getting the second prequel. This time it's centering around Haymitch Abernathy, who was played by Woody Harrelson in the original trilogy. It's a young Haymitch in his escapades in the Hunger Games themselves. It's called Sunrise on the Reaping, and we got our first little teaser trailer. Now, I've read the book, so I know pretty much what happens as long as they stay pretty faithful to the book, which it looks like they're going to. So I will not be giving away any details about the overall story in these segments. No worries about that. Just talking purely about what I see in the trailer. But I can't lie. I have my own expectations for what I'm imagining things to look like and what things might be appearing as and how visually things are going to be presented. So I just, I didn't know exactly what was going to happen in the trailer, obviously. But I as the trailer started, I was like, okay, this is the arena. This is what, what's going on. Haymitch, I don't think this is a spoiler at all. He, in the original trilogy was one of the victors from an earlier Hunger Games. So that's what we're seeing here. But anyways, I think that, yeah, I thought that there's a lot of really interesting material to dive into here. I have to say, and also, this is an interesting case because we've been talking a lot about that alleged Avengers Doomsday trailer that's going to be coming out in a few weeks, and that's all well and good. We've been talking a lot about trailers and release windows and things like that. Most, even major movies, it's even shorter for smaller indie movies because you want to get that buzz, getting drawn up pretty quickly. So smaller movies don't usually have a big marketing budget as well. But even the biggest blockbusters don't usually put out a first trailer until 5, 6, 7 months maybe in advance. This trailer is coming out a year away from the movie, and we just had a Hunger Games movie, so I'm a little confused as to what's going on here. But, I think that as a trailer, I don't know if I loved it, honestly. I kind of respect and I kind of get what they were going for with the countdown. I think that it's interesting. It's different, right, for trailers. It's not the usual montage of action shots. It is, but it's in a different way. But, and I get also... it's the arena, right? So if you're in the arena, there's a lot of, trickery and other things going on with there. So I get that, right? Something about the way this movie looks, though, just visually, right? And again, we don't really know anything about what the movie actually is about, unless you read the book. But again, I mean, just looking at the trailer, you don't really know what the movie is going to be about other than another Hunger Games with Haymitch, right? Something about the way the movie looks feels a little artificial. Something feels a little off, and maybe that is absolutely the intention, because once you're in the arena, of course, things can be manipulated and whatnot. So I don't know, but I watched the trailer and I never got the sense of being captivated. I just kind of was like, yeah, I'm watching a Hunger Games movie, which is interesting because when I read the book, I was pretty captivated. I remember reading the book and going, oh yeah, this is totally why I loved those original 3 books and why I like the original 3 movies or 4 movies. Because there is something captivating about the way that this plot and this concept is being executed. So I don't know. I mean, it's a first teaser trailer. I'm a little baffled as to why it's being released so incredibly early. But from the little that we got to see, I think we also see other supporting characters as well that I'm not going to spoil here, but we see some of them that I'm sure we'll get to know a little bit more in future trailers. But yeah, I mean, this movie's over a year away, I think, unless they moved it up and I just didn't realize. But it's kind of interesting that this is their first move, their first introduction into this new Hunger Games prequel, Sunrise on the Reaping. So guys, what do you think of this first teaser trailer for the new Hunger Games movie? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's talk about one of the upcoming MCU movies that we know is coming. It's been pretty much in the air. It's been up there for a while. Black Panther 3. Black Panther has been one of the most successful franchises that Marvel's ever done. It doesn't matter if you don't like Wakanda Forever. We're talking about successful in terms of box office. The first film obviously made tons of money, well over $1 billion. And the second movie, I believe, made $800 to $900 million. So very, very successful. And that's despite the fact that, yes, tragically, Chadwick Boseman passed away before the second film. And the second film was really led by Letitia Wright as Shuri, and of course the other characters like Namor and Queen Ramonda, Okoye, Lupita Nyong'o. So a lot of extenuating circumstances that made it the case. But we've also known that Black Panther 3 is on the way. Now, who knows what state the MCU is going to be after Secret Wars? I mean, we're all assuming some kind of reset, whether or not that means, because there have been a lot of rumors swirling around Damson Idris as Black Panther. Whether or not this has any weight at all, I have no idea. But there have been a lot of rumors about Damson Idris as potentially a Black Panther. So we'll have to see about that. But maybe he appears as a different version of T'Challa. I've always said, by the way, if you've been on the channel for a while, you'll have heard this segment or heard this spiel already. But I said, at the time, I probably would have recast T'Challa. This is 2020, 2021, post T'Challa's death, or to post Chadwick Boseman's death. And obviously, just again, it was a tragic thing as a human being. But as we had time to kind of digest it and really think about it and look at its implications for the MCU, I was of the mind that, I think it would be okay to recast him. But then when Kevin Feige and Ryan Coogler said, no, we're not going to recast him, I said, okay, I trust you guys. You guys seem like you have his best intentions in mind. Let's see what you got. And I love Wakanda Forever because I think Wakanda Forever is truly an encapsulation of grieving the loss of a human being in T'Challa. I really do. I think it's beautiful. That being said, it doesn't preclude now my opinion saying, okay, now that we've gotten that Wakanda Forever, I think it's fine to recast him. I think it's also fine to keep Shuri as Black Panther. I don't really have a preference. Shuri is going to be the Black Panther, it looks like, in Avengers Doomsday. And so that's either way they do it, it's totally fine. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. What we do know, though, at this point, because Ryan Coogler's been talking about it, and I think other people like Nate Moore and Kevin Feige have been talking about Black Panther 3 in development. What we do know now, thanks to some comments from Ryan Coogler himself, I think he was at some sort of conference or festival talking about Sinners, which is probably going to get some Oscar nomination and Oscar attention. But what he said was this, quote, "If it was anybody but you, I would say I can neither confirm nor deny," teased Coogler, "but we're working on it hard. It being Black Panther 3. Yeah, it's the next movie." So Ryan Coogler has confirmed that Black Panther 3 is going to be the next movie he's working on, which means that if they're working on it hard now, well, that opens the door for a whole lot of things to happen, because that means the film could very easily release at any point, in the next couple years. Because let's look at this calendar here. The MCU calendar is wide open right now. In 2026, there are going to be 2 films only, so far at least. July 31st, 2026, Spider-Man Brand New Day. Big movie. December 18th, 2026, Avengers Doomsday. Huge movie. And then as of right now, and it's actually kind of weird, it's been hard to get some sources where it has the most up-to-date Marvel release dates, but as far as I'm seeing right now, 2027 is clear of MCU releases other than Avengers Secret Wars. So all eyes, all attention, everything is going to be on Avengers Secret Wars in December 2027. That's December 17th, 2027. But then 2028, after this saga ends, we are going to be revamping and just full go, because 4 MCU movies are going to be released. We have February 18th, 2028, May 5th, 2028, November 10th, 2028, December 15th, 2028. So lots and lots of different options here. I'm going to throw out some guesses as to what I think, because, the interesting thing about this, right, is that there are way more than 4 MCU movies that are supposedly in production. And that's not even including films that we just don't know about. But I'm just to count off movies on a list here. X-Men, we know that's coming. Black Panther 3, we know that's coming. Shang-Chi 2 allegedly is coming. The Shang-Chi 2 better be one of those 2028 slots. It has to be, right? It has to be. Anyways, Shang-Chi 2. Doctor Strange 3 is also on that list. Guardians, I don't know. But there's going to be probably another mutant film, another Deadpool film. So there are a lot. Oh, Blade. I also forgot about Blade. Blade is probably coming in 2028. So there are a lot of options here. Looking at this list here, this is what I myself might assume is the 2028 slate, because again, there are more movies that I think, than fit these slots, and some of them are going to have to wait till 2029. These are the 4 that I would predict are coming out in 2028. February 18th, 2028, I would have to imagine is Shang-Chi 2. I think that if Destin Daniel Cretton is coming back, then he could come back and take on that, after Spider-Man Brand New Day. Maybe he's done. Maybe he's exhausted. But at any rate, another director could come in. We need a Shang-Chi 2. Maybe this is wishful thinking. Maybe Shang-Chi 2 is just never going to happen. But I just really hope that the first priority that Marvel has after Avengers Secret Wars is a Shang-Chi 2, because it's just been too long and they need to capitalize on it. They need to capitalize it. So my hope and maybe prediction would be February 18th, 2028 is Shang-Chi 2. May 5th, 2028, I do think is X-Men. I think that they want to put that marquee movie that they have, the X-Men, reintroducing the X-Men. I do think that Jake Schreier's X-Men is going to come out on May 5th, 2028, which I think leaves November 10th, 2028 pretty comfortably as Black Panther 3. Although you could convince me that November 10th is Blade, because, that's a little closer to Halloween. So maybe I'll say that actually November 10th, 2028 is going to be Blade, if that ever comes out. But if not, then I think that it will be Black Panther 3. And then December 15th, I think, flip-flop Blade and Black Panther 3. But if Blade is just not going to happen, then one of those could be Doctor Strange 3 for sure. So that's sort of my guess as to what's going on here. But again, anything can change. The point being that Black Panther 3 is probably going to take up a slot in 2028, which means we kind of know when the next movie is going to come out. And to be fair, right, Black Panther 3 coming out in 2028 is a long way away from where Black Panther Wakanda Forever was, which came out in 2022 in November. So it would be 6 years post Wakanda Forever, which the first Black Panther came out in 2018. So it was already, it was about 5 years since the first Black Panther, but still, from the first Black Panther in 2018 to the next one, probably going to be 10 years, which is crazy. So we'll have to see about that. But guys, anyways, Black Panther 3 is coming. Ryan Coogler is working on it, and it should be one of the first MCU movies out the gate in 2028. Guys, what do you think about any of this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, one big lesson that I've learned in doing this, in covering movies and talking about them and podcasting and things like that, is never make assumptions. Because assumptions, they kind of get you in trouble. You assume some things about, oh, of course this character is going to show up here, and of course, and they don't always pan out. And it's just important not to make assumptions. Case in point, in today's segment, one of the assumptions I had been making was that Punisher, Frank Castle, played by Jon Bernthal in the MCU, now the MCU, because he had been originally playing him in the Marvel Netflix universe, which is now pretty much canon in the MCU. Frank Castle, I was assuming, was going to appear in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. He was a pretty big supporting character, all things considered, in Season 1, despite the fact that he only shows up for a few episodes, but especially the ending. Pretty pivotal to the ending of that season. And he ends that season in a prison, Kingpin prison. He escapes because a guard was being ridiculously dumb, and that's the last we saw of him. And what we knew is that, or what we thought we knew, was that it was going to be a big year in 2026 for the Punisher. Kind of crazy that the Punisher might be showing up in the most MCU projects in 2026, because we thought Daredevil Born Again Season 2, the Punisher special presentation, and then Spider-Man Brand New Day. So we know he's going to be in that Punisher special presentation, and we know he's going to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day. And I think we all just assumed he was going to be in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Well, according to one of the executive producers of the show, he's not going to be in that season. Sana Amanat, I think, is how you pronounce that name. I don't know. Probably very wrong. Told Empire magazine that Punisher will not be back for Season 2 because he will be in his own special presentation. Now, on the one hand, right, Daredevil is building an army, and Punisher escapes. And you're like, well, one of the first recruits should be Punisher, especially just given how Season 1 ended, right? Of course you'd think that. I thought that. Then again, and of course, in an ideal world, I think you'd have him in all three, probably. But I think that if you had to choose one for the special presentation, if you were going to do that special presentation that was going to focus on him post-escape, then I think it actually makes a decent bit of sense that maybe he's just on the run and he doesn't want to side with Daredevil and he just wants to do things his own way. That's sort of his MO. And I think it's kind of a cool idea to just focus on him. It's almost like, what if Daredevil Born Again Season 2 just had a Punisher episode? It would effectively be the same thing, because this special presentation is probably going to be 45 to 50 minutes long. So in a sense, it's like, what if Daredevil Born Again Season 2 just had a Punisher standalone episode? Kind of be random, right? It would be kind of just, it wouldn't flow super well with the rest of the season. So versus that, you could, compared to that, you could have just a Punisher special presentation. And you could just have him do his own thing. And I think that actually lends itself much easier, and this is my greater point here, to a connection with Spider-Man Brand New Day. Because I just think one of the things that's been so interesting to track with Marvel over the last few years is how their connectivity had eroded, and then now they're starting to try to get it back. And having to connect Daredevil Born Again Season 2, Punisher Special Presentation, and Spider-Man Brand New Day, I think could have probably caused a lot of headaches. So it's just one less thing to kind of think about here in terms of, okay, so you now have Punisher just going from a straight shot from out of prison at the end of Season 1 into his special presentation where he's probably on the run or doing something, I don't know, and then straight into Spider-Man Brand New Day, because it's not like they're not connected, right? We've gotten confirmation, I think, from Brad Winterbaum, one of the television executives at Marvel, saying that, Punisher is going to be, Punisher and Spider-Man Brand New Day and Daredevil, they're going to be connected in some way, right? But now I think it just makes the line of sight much clearer that you have a straight shot with Frank Castle's story arc. We'll see. I mean, it could very well end up being that these two things just have nothing really to do with one another. It's almost like he just shows up in Spider-Man just randomly and there's nothing there to explain it. I would be a little bummed out about that because that's kind of been how the MCU has been operating lately. The characters just show up. Like Nick Fury going from Secret Invasion to the Marvels is my worst fear, right? That character, say what you will about Secret Invasion, that's fine. No continuity. Zero continuity between those two shows. And it's just a bummer, right? I know things got shuffled around. And originally the Marvels was going to come first and then Secret Invasion, which would have made a whole lot more sense. Anyways, all that aside. I think that I'm hoping that this allows for them to have more connective tissue between all the shows and the movies, and we can track Punisher's arc. So yeah, he's not going to be in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Maybe Jessica Jones, maybe Iron Fist, Luke Cage have bigger roles. We'll see. Because Daredevil needs an army, and you'd think that the Punisher would be first on his list if he knew that he escaped. But who knows? Maybe Daredevil doesn't even know he's escaped. It's kind of hard to believe that if he's running around the streets fighting the Hulk, but whatever, we'll see how that plans out. Guys, what do you make of all of this, that the Punisher is not going to be in Daredevil Born Again Season 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, I am looking forward to one of the most interesting new upcoming superhero properties in, I think, a long time. It's kind of sneakily, to me, one of the more interesting properties. That is Lanterns. Lanterns is interesting because I always find when, especially in this day and age, when we've had so many different iterations of Batman and Superman, we've now had Wonder Woman brought to live action, and so there are very few characters that haven't been done. And to be fair, obviously, Hal Jordan has been done. We just saw Guy Gardner, but we haven't gotten sort of a definitive Hal Jordan or Jon Stewart at all in live action. And I think even Ryan Reynolds would tell you that, by the way. It's not breaking news. So Lanterns, and also just the way they've been describing Lanterns is this really gritty, grounded detective mystery, buddy cop detective mystery, is so interesting to me. It just, this show to me has all the makings of something really fascinating and special. I kind of got similar vibes before The Penguin, and I'm really hoping that this is another HBO Max, HBO success story. However, there had been earlier reports saying, and earlier comments from James Gunn and other people saying that this was going to come out in early 2026. That is no longer the case. Because according to, from what I'm looking at here, the HBO and HBO Max, I think chairman or one of the executives there, they're saying that Lanterns, the DCU show, is not going to come out until the end of summer 2026. So that's probably August. I would put it at August. Which means, pretty definitively, unless something weird happens, Lanterns will not be coming out before Supergirl, or if I was going to say Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, but before Supergirl. Supergirl is currently slated for a June, I believe, or I think June 2026 release date, and Lanterns now will probably be coming out after that. Is this anything to worry about? I don't think so. I don't think that I think with these TV show release dates, it doesn't really matter. When they're coming out. I think that there are windows, sure, that's probably better for TV viewing, but it's not like movies where the summer is pretty definitively the best season for movies, and then winter and Thanksgiving are also sort of prime real estate spots as well. I think TV shows can kind of come out whenever, so maybe they just thought an August window would be a better date. I also think that, maybe they thought we need a little bit more time on this production. Maybe some of the VFX with the Green Lantern rings and whatnot just needs a little bit more polishing, and we just gotta kind of get that done. Because, I mean, thinking about it, right? If Green Lantern, or if Lanterns rather, was going to come out, let's just say March was the original release date. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying, March, for example. TV shows generally don't need to have as big of a marketing push as movies do. They don't have trailers that come out 6 months before and things like that. Not usually. But, at a certain point, maybe a few months before, you want to start putting out some trailers and whatnot. And maybe they were like, we're just not ready for that. There's a whole host of reasons as to why this could happen. And I just don't think that any of them are particularly concerning when this is the only news that's come out. Now, if in a month, right, we hear that, yeah, there was a disaster on set, the director left in the middle of it, and the show, something crazy like that, which I'm not saying is the case. I'm just saying, if we hear that is the case, and there's just something brewing, that something was brewing on set, then yeah, I mean, that is reason, obviously, to be concerned about this delay. But as it stands, I don't think that there's anything to worry about. I mean, would I have liked to have seen Lanterns? Because like I said, Lanterns is actually, in a world where Spider-Man Brand New Day, I love the Spider-Man trilogy from the MCU, and Avengers Doomsday, just one of the most interesting and fascinating movies to be coming out in the comic book movie space in a long time. In a world where those two movies are coming out next year, Lanterns, and of course, Daredevil Born Again Season 2, of course, Lanterns is up there. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm more excited about Lanterns than those two movies, but it's pretty up there. It is easily my most anticipated DCU project for quite a while. I'm excited. I'm really interested to see what Lanterns is. I mean, maybe I'm getting a little bit of James Gunn fatigue as well, because 2025 was, I think, a good year for the DCU, but it was very James Gunn heavy. And he's always had a ceiling. I've said this as well for Marvel. It's not just a DC thing. I said this for the Guardians films. I really like the Guardians films, but I think that for me, they always have a ceiling. And I think that I'm just curious to see what it was going to be the first big DCU project without James Gunn, but now it's going to be Supergirl. So anyways, I'm excited for next year. I think that it'll be interesting. I suspect now that then it'll be Supergirl, Lanterns, and then Clayface. It's Clayface coming out on September 11th, I think, of 2026. So yeah, we'll have to see what that looks like. But guys, what do you think about this? Lanterns has been delayed, but probably not for that long, and probably for no troubling reasons. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, kinda crazy to think, but in just a few weeks we will be officially 1 year away from Avengers Doomsday. Now I know that sounds like it's still really far away, and it is. 12 months, a whole heck of a lot can happen in 12 months, but like I've been saying before on this on the podcast, those months are just gonna start ticking down and down and down, and before we know it, Avengers Doomsday is on the way. But then again, Avengers Doomsday, in a sense, I'm not saying it actually is. I'm not trying to mitigate Avengers Doomsday, because I am very excited to see what Avengers Doomsday actually ends up being. Even if it's a train wreck, it promises to be one of the most interesting train wrecks of all time. I think, even if you're a Marvel hater, I think this is a movie. I'm not being paid by Marvel to say this. I really am not. But I think that it's going to be one of the most interesting films of all time, just with how massive it is and how much it's trying to go for, and where it sits within the context of the MCU. I think it's going to be so interesting. But then, right? Again, not to call Avengers Doomsday just an appetizer, but there is another film that promises to be, dare I say, even bigger than Avengers Doomsday, coming out right afterwards. And I say right afterwards, a year after Avengers Doomsday, and that's Avengers Secret Wars. Now, we don't know, we hardly know anything about Avengers Secret Wars, because Avengers Doomsday hasn't even come out yet, and Avengers Secret Wars isn't going to start filming until next year. But now, we know something very interesting about this movie, and that is one particular cast member, and certainly not the one that I thought. Certainly not the one that I don't think any of us thought would be the first to be quote-unquote confirmed. Because this is not Marvel confirming this person to be in Avengers Secret Wars, but it is a major source with maybe a caveat or two. So, Deadline, not just Deadline, I want to say with Deadline, yes, but somebody specifically in Deadline, through I don't know if it's a newsletter or something like that, but it's sort of a segment called Breaking Boz, written by a guy named Boz Bombing Boy. I definitely butchered the name, but Boz Bombing Boy. So this is sort of an article, a general profile of Sadie Sink, the actress Sadie Sink, and it has a lot of other things about Sadie Sink in there. Which, honestly, all respect to Sadie Sink, I would have loved to have, dived deep into this for a segment, but that's not why people are here. People are here because of one small paragraph within this big profile about Sadie Sink and what's coming up next for her in theater and things like that. This one small paragraph, towards the bottom of this article, that says this, quote, Spider-Man Brand New Day is scheduled to open on July 31st. there's been much speculation about the role Sink has in the Spidey film, and frankly, I do not know the answer. Okay, great, none of us do. But I do know that she'll join the cast of the next Avengers picture that shoots here in London later in 2026. So when Boz says this, he's not referring to Avengers Doomsday, because the film that is going to be shooting in London in 2026 is Avengers Secret Wars. Basically, Boz is saying, according to sources, that he knows that Sadie Sink is going to be in Avengers Secret Wars. Now, on the one hand, right? On the one hand, is this surprising at all? No, not surprising at all. I mean, in the sense that I think literally almost every single character that has appeared in the MCU, that will appear in the MCU, has even hints of the MCU, not even the MCU, Marvel in general, maybe even DC, maybe Batman shows up on Battleworld. I don't even know. I think so many characters are going to show up in Avengers Secret Wars. So, is it surprising that Sadie Sink's character, is going to be in Avengers Secret Wars? No, not really. And I think the follow-up question that a lot of us have is, does this really narrow down the possibilities of who she could be? I think, interestingly, based on some of the wording here, it does seem like this character might be more important than we think. Like, I don't know if the article would go out of its way to point out that, Sadie Sink is there to film a one-scene cameo and then dip out. Because, I mean, again, right, in a sense, not even technically, just really, Ned Leeds, Jacob, it would have been accurate to say before Avengers Infinity War, breaking news, Jacob Batalon seen on set of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, because Ned Leeds was in both Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. He had 3 scenes total, but he was in those 2 films. So, maybe Sadie Sink's character is not really connected to the multiverse at all, and she's just there because, guess what? Zendaya is also going to be in Avengers Secret Wars, because, remember, this profile was not here to say, breaking news, Sadie Sink is in Avengers Secret Wars. This profile was about Sadie Sink anyways, and this person just decided, I don't know why or how, but just decided to drop this little nugget that Sadie Sink is going to be in Avengers Secret Wars. But again, it could be in the context of maybe Sadie Sink is a student at MIT, and Zendaya and Jacob Batalon are also going to be in Avengers Secret Wars. Great, because, maybe the film starts out with the Earth crumbling and Peter is with his friends. Maybe that's what happens. Could it also mean that Sadie Sink is playing a character that is much more pivotal to the multiverse saga than we thought? People have said Jean Grey. I don't think so. Not at this point. I really don't think so. Still possible? Sure. She has been seen on set with, I think, red hair. I'm pretty sure still red hair. So, sure. Possible. Could she be Mayday Parker, right? A multiversal variant of Peter Parker and Mary Jane, or their daughter, rather? Possible. It is possible. I don't know, because it's hard to parse through the fact that this is a piece about Sadie Sink in specific, and it just happened to drop this little nugget in there. Again, if you did a piece on Zendaya, and then also in that article it said Zendaya is also expected to shoot scenes for the next Avengers film in London in 2026, we'd be like, whoa, what does that mean? It might just be 2 scenes. I don't know, based on the language here, because it seems like it's a little bit more important than just 2 scenes. But again, I mean, there's a whole wide range of implications, I think, is my point here. Though on the one hand, right? On the one hand, it could literally just be Sadie Sink's character just shows up and is part of the texture of where Spider-Man is entering Secret Wars. Because apparently, which I think is crazy, not crazy that, he's not gonna, I'm not saying that they're lying, but I'm just saying it's crazy that he's not there. Apparently he's not in Doomsday, which, again, crazy for Marvel's perspective to not try to make that work. They probably tried their hardest to make it work and it just didn't work. So I don't know. But let's just assume that he's going straight from Secret Wars or straight from Spider-Man Brand New Day to Avengers Secret Wars. Okay, maybe that's just she's just there to kind of help set up where he is, just like how he jumped from his school bus in Infinity War into the events of Infinity War. Maybe that's what it is. Or on the other end of the spectrum, this is subtle confirmation that she is playing a vastly important character to the multiverse saga, so much so that she has to be there. Which, might lend credence to the idea that she is playing someone related to the multiversal variant of Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. Maybe. It's possible. I think it's fascinating. I don't know what to make of this, because maybe we'll get confirmations of a ton of other characters showing up in the next little bit here. Or maybe it'll just be quiet for a long time and we'll just know that, hey guys, guess what? We don't know anyone else who's going to be in Secret Wars except for Sadie Sink as mystery character. So we'll have to see about that. Guys, what do you think about this? Sadie Sink is reportedly in Avengers Secret Wars. What do you guys think this means? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, I have been changed for good because we now live in a world where I, personally, and I hope you as well, have seen Wicked for good. And I hope you guys have been changed for good as well, because we are here to talk today about the second and final movie in the Wicked duology, duet, I don't know what you want to call it, two-part epic, whatever you want to use to describe it. We are here to talk about Wicked for good, aka Wicked Part 2, aka Wicked 2, all of that good stuff. So this is going to be a non-spoiler and spoiler review. So the first chunk of it, and I will very, very clearly delineate when the spoilers begin, so if you are listening for non-spoilers, no worries, just make sure to listen until you hear the spoiler warning very clearly, and then hop off and come back once you have, and then we will dive into some spoilers at the very end of this segment. So Wicked for good. Wicked for good. Well, just to back up a little bit here, I mean, this has probably been my most anticipated movie of the year. I remember the first time I saw Wicked Part 1, just a year ago, actually, no, not even a couple years ago. This movie is recent enough that we have been reviewing, we have been doing daily uploads on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, and we did a review for Wicked Part 1. So, it came out just a year ago, and I hadn't seen the Broadway play. I didn't know hardly anything about it, other than obviously just it's part of the Wicked, or part of the Wizard of Oz universe, and it's sort of a prequel / reimagining of that story, all of that good stuff. So, I mean, I knew some things, but I didn't really know anything. And I went into that movie, into Wicked Part 1, pretty cold. And I remember, I just have such a distinct sense memory of my experience watching that movie, especially the end of the whole Defying Gravity section. That movie is, and it's not the same. It's not the same as your Spider-Man No Way Homes, where Tobey and Andrew show up and everyone starts clapping. And it's not the same as Avengers Endgame when everyone steps out of the portal. It's not that kind of theater experience, but truly, Wicked Part 1 was one of the most visceral and memorable and one of the best theater experiences I have had ever watching a movie. I couldn't believe how unbelievably emotional and transcendent that movie was. It surprised me. It stunned me. It shocked me. And I like musicals. I like movie musicals a lot, but it floored me. So, needless to say, I had pretty high expectations for Wicked Part 2, but, I think just based on the fact that the second movie, I mean, it's the same cast, same crew, same everything, it seems like, again, not knowing anything about the story of what happens in Wicked Part 2 other than what I saw in the trailers, which we'll talk about in just a second. I just had faith in John Chu and Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande to just pull off a great second half, a great second part. And the trailers did nothing to deter me. I mean, I don't think the trailers were quite as good as for Wicked Part 1, but I thought the trailers were great. I thought that, again, not having heard any of the music beforehand, I intentionally try to stay away so that when I go see the movie, then I can actually, experience it for the first time within the movie. And, I mean, for good, sounded great in the trailers. No Good Deed sounded great in the trailers, so I was really, really excited. So I went to go and see Wicked Part 1. Is it as good, in my eyes, as the first movie? No, I don't think so. Does it have to be? No, I also don't think so. I've said this a lot, actually, with these kinds of sequels. I mean, I feel like the bar had been set so high for the first movie, and to expect Wicked Part 2 to be as good as Wicked Part 1, I think it's just, sometimes I think about, maybe that's just not a fair metric to use, honestly. Because I think that, to go into a movie and be disappointed that it's not as good as one of my favorite movies of all time or of the recent past, and to devoid of myself of all enjoyment of the movie just because it didn't live up to that, I don't think that's fair. I liked Wicked Part 2. I did. I think that the flaws in Wicked Part 2, from my eyes, are a little more apparent and a little more clear, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit, than in Wicked Part 1, which I just think flowed so beautifully and so well. And I do think Wicked Part 2 is a little bit of a bumpier ride. It's hard to look at Wicked Part 2 because it's an interesting thing, right? When you make two-part movies, and I'm going to call them two-part movies because a lot of these movies that are split into two are basically one giant story. And it's interesting because I've found that for most of these two-part movies, they get one well, I mean, some of them don't get either part well. They don't do either part particularly well. But for a lot of these recent 2-part movies that I've been seeing, they do either the first movie really well or the second movie really well, but the other one ends up feeling really incomplete. And I was so impressed by Wicked Part 1 because it felt so complete, and yet I understood why it was just Part 1. I mean, that's amazing, right? So I was heading into Part 2 thinking, okay, can Part 2 do the same? And I think what was interesting about just as Wicked Part 2 was unfolding, it almost felt like, oh, this is not the start of a new movie. This is not the start of a new story. This is more of a welcome back from intermission. And I actually noticed throughout the beginning of Wicked Part 2, I think towards the end, it sort of felt, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, what I'm about to say, but I think towards the end, it felt a little more cinematic and it felt a little bit more movie-like. But towards the beginning, I was watching Wicked Part 2 and thinking, this feels much more like Broadway. This feels much more like a stage musical than the first movie did, which is interesting. And I don't know, again, I don't know how much of it is part of, being a direct adaptation from the Broadway musical and they just had to take things from the Broadway musical and bring them here. I don't know. But the first bit of Wicked for Good felt a lot more like Broadway. It's kind of hard to quantify what that means, but it really did feel more like, hey, welcome back from intermission, and that's all well and good because that is what happens I'm presuming in the Broadway show. I haven't seen the Broadway show, but obviously you define gravity, intermission, and then you come back, right? So I'm assuming that that's what's happening. But in the context of watching this movie as a complete 2-hour experience, it was, I will admit, the first chunk of the movie, it's not an insignificant amount. The first chunk of the movie, I don't know if it was the first hour, first 45 minutes, it was a little bit all over the place in my eyes. I think there were a lot of interesting things that were being discussed within the first hour. If the first movie was about, ostracization or othering or, not accepting people and discrimination and things like that, I at least thematically, right? I think that's sort of what the first movie was about. This movie takes some pretty big thematic swings. And I think this movie wants to talk about things like propaganda, like truth and covering up the truth, and what leads good people to do bad things and things like that. This movie wants to tackle a lot of those themes, and I think those are very, very valuable themes. It's just that I think a lot of the actual action of the first hour kind of felt like it was bobbing and weaving rather than moving in a very straight line. So it took me a little while, admittedly, to get very locked into the story. Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo are amazing, as always. They are I can't, there are no words, there are too many words, there are no words to describe how great they are in the role. They're amazing as well. Jonathan Bailey is great. Jeff Goldblum fits the role that he has to play very well. Michelle Yeoh is really good. Everybody in the cast is great. All the things you loved about Wicked Part 1, in general, the technical elements, the visual style, the sound effects, the costumes, all of that stuff is still there, and it is still just as good as ever. And there are some great set pieces. There are some really fun songs towards the beginning, although nothing really as memorable in this movie as in the first movie in terms of music. There's obviously a couple songs like For Good that are sort of the linchpin songs for this movie, but nothing like Popular or What Is This Feeling or songs like that. But that's okay. I mean, it's just part and parcel of adapting the second half of a Broadway show that was meant to be seen in one go. So that is what it is. But again, I do feel like the first chunk of this movie was trying to find its footing. And I don't know if it would change my experience at all if I watched them back to back, but the first half felt less of, oh, we're starting another chapter in this story, and more of, oh, we're trying to pick up the pieces from the last story and kind of go somewhere. And then, for those of you who know the musical, you might know what I'm alluding to here. For those of you who have even seen the trailers, you might know what I'm alluding to here. But I think the story also felt burdened, and I'm sure the musical as well, to do a couple things to tie up some story threads as well as the movie was going along, that I think at certain points felt a little forced, in my opinion. And maybe that's just me knowing what I know about, Wicked and The Wizard of Oz and things like that. But it felt a little bit forced, I would think. So there's that. It sounds like, though, so if you've been listening to the review thus far, it sounds like I didn't have such a good time. I said at the beginning, I like this movie. Why did I like this movie? The ending of Wicked for Good, not all of the ending, but I think the way in which they wanted to end this movie, I think John Chu, obviously again, acknowledging there's the Broadway play. I haven't seen the Broadway play, so maybe he's just directly taking what's on the Broadway play and putting it into the movie. That's great. That's totally fine. You still have to be a very talented director to do that well, and he did it well. Because it was clear to me that the first hour-ish, hour and a half-ish of this movie was, like hour plus of the movie, was kind of going somewhere and was wanting to talk about bigger themes and things like that, but just the plot was meandering a little bit. And then they get to this point where I think they understood that this was where this entire 4 or 5 hour journey had been going the whole time. And once they get to that point, this movie clicks. It clicks back into gear. And I remember having some of the same feelings that I had from watching Wicked Part 1 and thinking, yes, this is what I remember. And so the way that they ended this movie, to me, was very emblematic and very poetic and symbolic of the journey that we'd been on with these characters. I think that the ending of Wicked for Good understood the assignment, understood where these characters had been, who they had been, where they had been going, and what had been important for us in this journey to witness as we watched these characters grow. And it's kind of amazing to see where these characters end up as this 5 hour epic kind of concludes and wraps up here. So for that reason, right, it's hard because, again, I want to look at Wicked Part 2, Wicked for Good, as its own 2 hour movie, but the movie, it almost doesn't want you to do that in an interesting way, which, again, I'm not saying is a good or a bad thing. I would much prefer if Wicked for Good was just a very complete 2 hour movie, or it felt like a very complete 2 hour movie. I don't know that it does. Again, I think the beginning feels very much like, hey, welcome back from intermission. We're coming back. But I will say that the way that it closes everything out here feels so right and so appropriate and leaves you feeling happy. I walked out of the movie and I said, it makes me feel happy that I got to see all of this come to fruition from beginning of last November to now, this November, seeing all of that come to fruition. So I think, you may not like Wicked for Good as much as you like Wicked Part 1. I don't. That's okay. I don't think, again, the lofty standards that the first movie set, I don't think Wicked Part 2 needed to hit those standards to be an entertaining movie in my eyes. It took some big swings. It really did. And I just think that it kind of lost its footing, especially towards the beginning. But by the time it ended, I was like, no, this is a story. These are characters. This is a world that I have been so glad to have been wrapped up in for the last year. So that's my overall thought. Those are my overall thoughts on Wicked for Good. Now we're going to transition into the spoiler discussion. So if you have not seen Wicked for Good, no worries. Just make sure to save this segment, save the podcast for later, and come back once you have. Let's dive in to spoilers. So the thing I was referring to earlier about loose ends is The Wizard of Oz, because I get it, right? And I understand that at a certain point here, Wicked being what it is, that Wicked had to tie itself back to The Wizard of Oz. I think some of it felt a little forced, though, in the context of this story, because I think the first movie had the freedom to be what it was, just Wicked, right, in the world of The Wizard of Oz, and setting up events that would, of course, overlap with The Wizard of Oz. But I feel like this movie in particular kind of felt burdened to... it felt very origin story in certain places, like, oh, there's the Tin Man. Oh, there's the Scarecrow. Oh, there's the Cowardly Lion. And it's like, I get it. I got it. And, oh, look, it's Ness's death. The tongue twisters. Wicked Witch of the East. She dies, and the Slippers. And also, on the side, Elphaba and Glinda are having a fight. So, I feel like the movie just, it didn't, it kind of felt obligated to do that, if that makes sense. And again, Broadway play probably did the same. I have to acknowledge that every single time. But still, as just somebody who's watching the movie, I kind of felt that throughout. A couple other things. So the beginning of the movie, right, it just feels like things were just happening, I was a little confused. I don't know if someone can explain this to me in the comments. Of Elphaba shows up at Oz, and she has the wizard in a cage. And then she just leaves. I get that maybe she didn't want to kill him or anything, but I mean, the whole movie could have kind of ended right there and then, but she just decides to leave, and then the rest of the movie happens. That was another kind of weird thing. Again, I just think that a lot of things in this first chunk of the movie are just sort of happening, right? Of course, you're invested in the Fiyero and Elphaba romance, but that's not really set up in this movie. It was set up a little bit, a decent bit, I guess, in the last movie. But in this movie, it's just sort of like, hey, Fiero's like, I'm gonna join you. That's it. I'm in love. And it's like, okay, well, I guess part one, part one for backstory on all of this, which again, kind of goes to that whole, I do feel like this movie just felt a little more incomplete than the first movie. And yeah, I mean, like even the encounter with Elphaba and Nessa and Bach, it just felt like, oh, Tin Man. That's how we got the Tin Man. That's how Nessa kind of turned, not evil, but just, sort of turned away from Elphaba. Like all those kinds of things. So, there's that. But again, I mean, of course, I was referring to For Good and the way that they wrap up Elphaba and Glinda's story together. It's a beautiful thing. I teared up at the end. It's a beautiful thing to see those two characters and where they're intertwining, where their stories go, and how they meet each other, where they meet each other at the beginning of Wicked Part 1, and how they get to where they get to at the end and saying goodbye. And I love, Elphaba's like, Glinda, you can be good, right? I think that's a beautiful thing to witness and to see, to see happen. Again, I don't think the music was particularly standout other than For Good and probably No Good Deed. For Good is great. It's amazing. It's awesome. It's such a good song. But yeah, I mean, I won't lie. I teared up at the end of that or during that song as well. I thought Elphaba was just going to die because it's in the Wizard of Oz, canon or lore. Or I don't know what you want to call that. But yeah, I mean, the Wicked Witch of the West dies. So I thought, okay, Elphaba's dead. And then we kind of wrap up with Glinda. But shocker, she's alive, because this is the last thing I'll say, kind of a goofy note to wrap up here on, but the whole movie, as Fiyero kind of disappears and Elphaba turns him into a scarecrow, I was like, oh yeah, so he's gonna join the rest of the group. And I was thinking, well, how are they going to explain that? Because he obviously knows who Elphaba is, so why is he going along with these people, to see the wizard? Like he knows everything, right? What's going on there? And then he never shows up, and I was like, well, that's a glaring plot hole. Are they just gonna like? My thought was, right, because I think, so Cowardly Lion needs courage, Tin Man needs a heart, and I think Scarecrow needs a brain. Am I wrong? So I was like, maybe something in the spell went wrong and he forgot everything and they just don't want to talk about it. And then he shows up at the end, and then Elphaba's alive. So those were things that I was like, oh, didn't expect that. That was interesting. So anyways, kind of a goofy note to end this review on, but it was just something that I remembered and caught my attention. So anyways, guys, Wicked For Good. Look, I mean, Wicked Part 1, like I said at the beginning, was just something of a transcendent theater experience for me. I will never forget that. And I will watch that movie and I will cherish that movie. And what I love about that movie is, I think I will eventually do a back-to-back Wicked and Wicked For Good watch at some point, because I think it'll be fun. But I think also because I just love Wicked Part 1 so much, and I what I love about it is that it's a complete movie in my eyes. I would have no qualms with just watching Wicked Part 1 and then just being done with it, at least for in one sitting, because it's complete to me. Wicked For Good doesn't feel the same in my eyes, but I'm really glad I saw it, and I'm really happy to see how the story wrapped up. So guys, I'm assuming if you're still here, you've seen Wicked For Good. What did you guys think about it? What did you enjoy the first one more, the second one more, or do you just consider them one big movie? Let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 105 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's going to be crazy. I'm hoping to see Knives Out at a certain point. I don't know if it's going to be in theaters this week. Knives Out, Zootopia, Five Nights at Freddy's, Percy Jackson, Avatar. We are just barreling towards the end of the year, and it's exciting. It's really exciting. So guys, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. We're going to have a lot of exciting content, of course, the current things, but then also wrapping up the year in December and looking ahead to 2026, and hopefully in January we'll be pretty focused in on some Oscar movies as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Audio only platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Overcast as well. That will do it, guys, for episode number 105 of the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.